There are more than 100 different ways of going about program evaluation. What are the patterns in those ways? How do we group evaluation types together? Greetings, I'm Michael Quinn Patton, and in this video, we're going to have a discussion with Sara Vaca about her new article on the periodic table of evaluation, a way of displaying the great panorama of diverse evaluation approaches. I'm going to very quickly just take you through some of the efforts to categorize evaluation, not to go through them in detail, but to give you a sense of the mammoth nature of this challenge and the different ways that people have approached it. Beginning with Ernest House in 1980, in his book Evaluating with Validity, that's become one of the classics in the field. He grouped evaluations by their major audiences or reference groups, their consensus assumptions and approach, methodology, outcomes of the evaluation, and typical questions. One of the most influential approaches to grouping evaluations was by Shadish, Cook, and Leventon in 1991. And they grouped evaluations by looking at how they dealt with valuing, how they dealt with knowledge generation, how they dealt with social programming, how they dealt with use, and what the primary practice was. The Better Evaluation website looks at evaluations by the stages in which they take on the work. Evaluation approaches to defining, framing, describing, understanding causes, synthesizing, and reporting. And so they take a stepwise approach to organizing evaluations. One of the major efforts at doing this was in 2007. Dan Stufflebeam and Anthony Shrinkfield did a book on evaluation theory, models, and applications, with a second edition in 2014 with Dan Stufflebeam and Chris Korn. And what they did was look at 33 evaluation approaches, classified on the extent to which they align with the program evaluation standards of utility, feasibility, propriety, and accuracy. Jody Fitzpatrick, James Sanders, two former presidents of the American Evaluation Association, with Blaine Worthen and Lori Wingate, identified 5 approaches to program-oriented evaluation: an expertise-oriented approach, a consumer-oriented approach, program-oriented approaches, decision-oriented approaches, and participation-oriented approaches. Donna Mertens and Amy Wilson, in their book on program evaluation theory and practice, looked at 34 different approaches under 4 paradigms. What they called the post-positive paradigm, focused on methods approaches, the pragmatic paradigm focused on evaluation use, the constructivist paradigm focused on values driving evaluation, and Donna Mertens' transformative paradigm focused on social justice. Perhaps the most influential of these approaches is Evaluation Roots by Marv Alkin and Christina Christie in its 3rd edition. They looked at grouping evaluators on a theory tree by their priority emphasis on either how evaluations are used, on evaluation driven by methods, or evaluation driven by valuing. I did a YouTube video on the evaluation panorama, distinguishing approaches by what's evaluated, where the evaluator is located, whether the evaluation sought definitive answers or multiple perspectives, the extent to which there was a focus on independent judgment or participatory co-creation, descriptive approaches versus explanation approaches, accountability approaches versus learning approaches, generalizability approaches versus contextualizing approaches, a project focus versus systems focus, and went on to look at use, technical approaches, values-driven, the evaluator and control versus dealing with complexity kinds of issues, and used that evaluation panorama to simply describe the great, what I call the evaluation theory forest, the many different distinct approaches to evaluation that gives us a sense of the great variety. A different metaphor, that of an evaluation garden, was used by Bianca Montrose-Moorhead, Daniela Schroeder, and Lisa Wilson-Betcho in an article published in the American Journal of Evaluation in 2024. They used the flower metaphor, the gardening metaphor, to suggest the different ways in which evaluations emphasize certain things, and they took the petals of a flower to identify different kinds of evaluation flowers. So they have 8 dimensions that they look at on 8 petals on the flower: power dynamics, the values of the evaluation, the depth of engagement, how they approach valuing, the nature of engagement, activism, promoting use, and context. That brings us then to the periodic table of evaluation done by Sara Vaca. And we're going to talk with Sara about that approach to organizing and examining the great variety of evaluation approaches. So in this long-standing attempt to classify, categorize, and depict different evaluation approaches, Sara Vaca has done an innovative and unique approach with a periodic table based on her interest in visualizing. And so what brought you to the idea of trying to classify evaluation approaches?
So I remember in my master's, in my master's in evaluation, they would be paying a lot of attention to the methodological choice. And so this idea of that rigor and the golden standard is to better adapt your design and your methodology to the context and to the evaluation. And so I was like, my brain is kind of analytical sometimes, very often. And so I was like, what are the choices? What is the catalog? So I tried to start putting it together. And it was a list, but I don't like lists. So I made it in a visual way.
The catalog of evaluation choices. So
yeah, so the beginning was like a list, right? And because evaluation is fascinating. I've been practicing for 13 years, not a lot, but already quite a lot. So there are so many different elements to it and like layers. So I started putting them together from the top of my head. So I started with the paradigms because I acknowledge that we don't talk about them, but they're there and they are the problem, not the beginning of the problem, but they influence a lot of things, but in an unconscious way because we don't talk much about them. And then, there's the focus, like lenses that you can put on, or somehow like approaches at the same time, but things you could focus on. And then there were, of course, approaches, also very difficult to describe what they are, but they're like not recipes, but maybe perspectives too, like the focus ways of doing evaluation that are slightly different from other types, if that makes sense. And then the methods, in this case, these are data collection methods. Then I realized later that there were also analysis methods for analysis. And then I knew also that we talk a lot about designs, and this is something that is always interesting. Design is like the logic behind how we evaluate impact, right? And I've always thought, but I've never done it, like, why don't we make explicit and articulate the design behind other criteria, right? Like relevance, there's also a rationale how you evaluate relevance or efficiency and so on. But anyway, what we hear or what we talk about when we talk about designs are usually how to evaluate causality or attribution, contribution. So those were there too. And then there were the criteria, like the main questions that we usually ask. And then also this difference between an evaluation has objectives, like what it wants to achieve, and an evaluation has purposes, like why it is done for. And then I realized that paradigms were not only mine, but also the people I work with, my clients or the commissioners, or as you want to call it. So this was this list. And then from a visual point of view, in reality, each of the groups or categories have like a position, like a place, but then I reinforced it with colors.
So the different categories of things, basically, you're suggesting that any given evaluation is a combination of these different things. So it's a combination of the evaluator's paradigm, what it's going to focus on, approaches, methods, design, criteria, objectives, purpose, and the commissioner's paradigm. Some combination of that is what defines a particular evaluation. Is that what we understand here?
Yeah, sure. This is like the ingredients, like the category, like, yeah, categories, I guess. Yeah, like main course, second course, and dessert and drinks. So usually any meal will have those. Sometimes we can skip some of those, but and like sometimes you read evaluations that are not articulated, or they're not explicit about what design they're using or what approach, but there's some kind of them. Yeah, I think all this is being published now, but I did this in 2017, so it's quite a long time ago. I don't fully agree with it anymore, but this is what I did at the time.
So since you said this is from 2017, anybody using it today could add to the different elements whatever ingredients they wanted to add, but they would be able to use this framework to, if they thought there was an approach that's not there or a focus, but they would still have this idea that they need to combine these ingredients to get a particular evaluation. Is that right?
At that time, I tried to make it to include everything I knew at the time. I knew it was not exhaustive, but I tried from what I knew. Of course, we can enlarge it now and make it more complete. But this is like, yeah, if you're, this is like the list of possibilities. It should be like that. Yeah, that's why it's called a catalog of choices. Like, this is what you could choose from. And then each evaluation would have some of them active and many of them inactive, and that's okay. But I thought it was interesting to show that I had tools, that I had options, that when I was presenting a design, is because I had thought of other options and I was trying to adapt to the context, and not because I was just doing evaluation by default, if you want.
Now you've got some other displays, some other ways that you visualize this. Show us what else you've done.
Okay, so then I thought that, no, you know what? I was living in Taiwan at that time, and I saw somewhere on the internet a funny periodic table. I don't know if it was of dogs or I don't know, something funny like that, or drinks or cocktails or something. And I thought, oh, my table, because it has the paradigms at the beginning and at the top and at the end, looks like the periodic table. So I turned it, I flipped it, and then I just made another iteration where I tried to make it look like a periodic table. But that was just for fun. The content is the same.
So this one has some additional elements at the bottom. Tell us about what's in the bottom.
What frameworks, issues inherent to evaluation. Yeah, there's like so much underlying evaluation that it also is not discussed in designs. And because there was some weeks or maybe months between the first catalog that I showed that was vertical, and then when I flipped it, I realized that I was missing things out. So the definition of evaluation, all the incredible amount of ethics and values that is underneath that, the discussion about what is credible evidence, or all the new, now I see that systems thinking is another paradigm or is another approach. Or
you also, interestingly, added supply and demand to the two sides of it. So what the evaluator supplies in way of a paradigm, what the commissioners demand in a way, and you put that as bookends for what's in the middle. I think that's an instructive and fascinating way to organize and think about it, with the questions at the bottom. What is evaluation? The history, the ethics and values, what's credible evidence, the role of the evaluator. So this gives us another way of looking at it. I think you have one more, don't you?
And so I thought that this would be a nice addition to this series, just to encourage people to, well, first of all, acknowledging that usually what we discuss, when you propose a design and then the organization works with you and the commissioners at the end, negotiate somehow or discuss or improve the design. Usually we only talk about approaches and designs and methods, but we don't talk about the other things. Yes, when organizations decide they want to do an evaluation, they know why. And usually they know what they want to know or what they want you to answer. Although I usually include, in case there are no questions about equity or gender equity, for example, that's something I would negotiate and I would add, because I heard this expression of gender blind evaluations and I didn't want to, or equity blind evaluations, and I didn't want to do any of those anymore. So anyway, but apart from this little influence in the questions, what we decide or what we discuss about is the design per se, which is okay. And trying to show and justify that we're not doing evaluation per default, just business as usual, but we're thinking about each particular evaluation design independent in particular.
This particular chart, you're calling our attention to the difference between those things that are usually defined and explicit, and those areas where there's negotiation, and then the things that are often unspoken, the paradigm kind of elements. So this periodic table helps make explicit what's not often spoken and highlights the areas for negotiation. How do you think about people being able to use this? What would you offer them as a way to approach this if they read the article?
Well, I guess it's like when we were trying to explore the world and see where the limits were, where the world finishes, like the land. This is like trying to know where evaluation world expands to, where are the limits or where are the far ends that we may not get used to. So what I'm trying to put together is invite people is to have a clear idea before entering an evaluation, have a clear idea of the options and the tools we have, because it's so subtle. There are so many options, and at the same time we end up, or I feel like I end up doing more or less the same thing every time, and that is frustrating. And the methods, they blow my mind, because doesn't matter where, in which country, which sector, which type of evaluation, which purpose, we're always using the same methods. And I know they're very powerful and I love them. I love to do interviews and I love to read literature or reports, and I love to do group discussions and I love observation. But I could say that 100% of my evaluations have used those methods and only a few of them have used some others. And that somehow I cannot, my brain has like a little disconnection there, like how can this be possible? So I want to encourage myself to use other methods. I don't know why. I guess it's because to walk the talk of adapting design to the context. But if I don't remember there are other methods, then I'm probably never going to use them. So that's how it's like a reminder of things that exist. And now that I see it, it looks so, there are so many elements, but it looks so limited.
And one possibility for use is when somebody's working with stakeholders or doing a workshop, if nothing else, they could put this slide up as just reminding people of what the diversity of evaluation is, what the many options are, and they wouldn't have to be restricted to this set, but it's a very nice display that immediately says there's a lot of different ways of going about this. And I take it visually, that's what you're going for, is to show that there is a great deal of diversity. There are many options. There are ways of organizing those options, but a person, an evaluator working with stakeholders, wouldn't have to go through every box. Simply the visual impact here is of the many different ways of going about evaluation. And that itself strikes me as a contribution.
Yeah. So yeah, for me, there are three ways, three contributions or uses of the table. One, as I told you, is for me as an evaluator, the day I know how to use all these boxes, because there are some of them that I don't even know how to apply. So, but I know that they exist, so maybe I can find out. So for me to know what the possibilities are, for you to have the discussion with the stakeholders to say, hey, this is a rich discipline and we can do a lot of things. And what we're suggesting, we have been thoughtful about it. And also for people who are entering evaluation, maybe that's also another use for them to have a quick overview of many of the things they will be hearing about and that they should be familiar with.
A potential use of the periodic table to give new and emerging evaluators a sense of the great variety and diversity of evaluation approaches offers an opportunity to use Sara Vaca's own experience as her career has developed to give us insights into the way in which being an evaluator can affect a person and how doing evaluation can affect the field of evaluation. And Sara's professional career illustrates that. In the article, under her name, she identifies herself as Evaluation and Data Visualization Specialist, Loving Clarity. I engaged with Sara about what that meant. And what emerged is a story of her own professional development that is inspiring and significant and offers an opportunity for us to think about the journey of being an evaluator as Sara openly shares her own experience of that. I've added some visualizations that were evoked for me by Sara's story, but are they a distraction or do they augment? You can judge. But what's important is to think about the development of being an evaluator as experienced in Sara's inspiring journey. Here's how that unfolded in the interview. Tell us about what brought you to loving visuals. How did you come to view that as your evaluation niche?
Okay, so the year is 2011. I have a baby and I'm not working. And so I entered Twitter, which just started, and I start seeing infographics there. And I'm immediately attracted to that. And I say, ooh, this is a language I understand. And so I immediately started playing with that in a very rudimentary way at the beginning. And so that's how it started. And after that, I realized that as a human species, humankind has communicated visually, in the caves at the beginning, and then we invented alphabets and writing, and then things changed and knowledge started being shared and reproduced in a massive way, and that was a revolution. But also as a human being, when you're a child, you start drawing because you don't know how to write or read. And then you start writing and reading, and then you forget about the visual part. And it's like that speaks to me so loudly that I had to get it back. And it's not at all about drawing, but it's about this visual dimension on how to express yourself in a visual way.
Wonderful. I love that history. There are at least three different ways you've identified your work. This one is visual brains. Then you've got loving visuals and loving clarity. Those things seem to go together. Loving clarity, loving visuals, visual brains.
Oh
Tell
my
us
God,
about
I
how you're
blush.
identifying yourself, how you're thinking about.
I blush because it's embarrassing on one side. At the same time, it's beautiful because it's how I am evolving as a person. I used to be visual brains when I discovered how visual my brain was. But then 2 years ago, I had this breakthrough in a training that I did. I belong to this. I live in France. I belong to this French entrepreneur association, and we do a lot of personal development. Long story short, I had a breakthrough, and I realized that I was living a lot in my mind, and that I was not using the other part, like my my other energy that doesn't belong in my head, belong in my belly and my heart and my guts. And so I said, I don't want to be visual brains anymore. I have to have love in it. And because something got deblocked, and that was very liberating and beautiful and makes me want to cry. So I started calling it Loving Visuals. But when I started, and this is still my email today, but I realized when I was using it that maybe I come across as a graphic designer. I'm not. I love designing or visualizing information, but I'm also an evaluator. And then, like 1 year later, so 1 year ago, I realized that because people were asking me, why do you love so much data visualization and evaluation? They're so different things. And I realized that what aligns them and what aligns me as a person is clarity. I love evaluation because it brings clarity, and I love data visualization because it brings clarity. And that's why I love both of them. So now my final brand is going to be Loving Clarity. So yeah, I'm loving clarity now.
Sarah and I are working on an updated version of the periodic table of evaluation. And I want to thank Sara for the stimulating discussion, for the work that she's done on this, and for sharing her story. Thank you, Sara.